All right, let's get started. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really significant piece of legislation, the Seeds Bill of 2025. Now, for those of us studying agricultural policy, this isn't just another legal document. It's essentially a new blueprint for the future farming in India. We're going to break down its complex legal framework, all the way from the powerful national committee at the top, right down to the local seed dealer. So, right on the cover, the bill states its core mission: to provide for regulating the quality of seeds for sale and import. That sounds simple enough, right? But don't let the straightforward language fool you. This is a massive undertaking. It's a foundational attempt to bring the entire seed supply chain under a single, comprehensive law, replacing a whole patchwork of older, sometimes conflicting regulations. And that really brings us to the central question for our analysis today. We're not just looking at individual rules in isolation. We're trying to understand the whole system. How does this bill fundamentally restructure India's seed ecosystem, from the highest echelons of policymaking all the way down to the person selling seeds in a local shop? Let's dig in. To tackle this, we'll break it down into 5 key areas. First, we'll look at the foundational definitions, the legal language that sets the stage. Then we'll move on to the new central command structure, the national registration system it oversees, how the state governments plug into all this. And finally, we'll get to the nuts and bolts of quality control. Okay, first section. As with any piece of legislation, the definitions are everything. They set the boundaries for what the law can and can't do. Let's zoom in on 3 absolutely critical definitions that really shape this entire bill. So first up, the term farmer. You might think you know what that means, but the legal significance here is all about the exclusion. The bill defines a farmer in that traditional sense, someone cultivating land. But look at what it explicitly does not include: any company, trader, or dealer. This distinction is vital because it creates 2 separate tracks, regulating individual agricultural practice differently from large-scale commercial enterprise. Next up is variety. Now, this gets a bit technical, but it's absolutely central to how the bill's registration system works. For something to be legally considered a variety, it has to check 3 boxes. 1, it has to be definable by its genetics. 2, it needs to have commercial value. And 3, this is crucial, it has to be stable, meaning it stays the same after propagation. This is the scientific bedrock for what can and cannot be registered and sold. And finally, we have spurious seed. The definition here is direct and it's powerful. A seed is legally spurious if it's not what it says it is, or if it doesn't meet the minimum standard for genetic purity. Period. This clear-cut definition is what gives the law its teeth when it comes to enforcement, which we're going to talk more about in a bit. All right, now that we have the key terms down, let's move up the chain of command. At the very top of this whole new regulatory structure, there's a single, powerful body, the Central Seed Committee. You can think of this committee as the brain of the entire operation. So, as laid out in the bill, this committee is set up by the central government, and it's based in New Delhi. And get this, it's made up of a chairperson plus 27 members. This is not some small advisory panel. It's a major regulatory authority. Its mandate is sweeping. It's responsible for the effective implementation of the entire act and serves as the main advisor on all things seed-related for both the central and state governments. And just look at the scope of its advisory role. We're talking about the entire life cycle of a seed, from the very beginning, planning and R&D, all the way to production, storage, trade policy, and even setting the standards for registration. It really does become the ultimate authority in the whole seed ecosystem. Okay, so if the Central Seed Committee is the architect, then the National Registration System is the main gateway it designed. From now on, no seed variety can be legally sold for sowing or planting unless it goes through this formal process. Let's walk through how that works. The process is very methodical, very hierarchical. It all starts with an application to a specialized registration subcommittee. That subcommittee then does the heavy lifting, scrutinizing all the data and making a recommendation. But, and this is key, the final say rests with the full Central Seed Committee. Only when they give the green light does the registrar officially enter the variety into the National Register. It's a real multi-layered vetting process.
But here's the thing, registration isn't a one-and-done deal. Section 15 builds in some pretty strong enforcement mechanisms. A registration can be suspended or even totally revoked. Why? Well, maybe it was based on falsified data, or the variety just isn't performing as promised. It can even be revoked for broader public interest or environmental concerns. The big takeaway here is that oversight doesn't stop after the initial approval.
So we have the Central Committee setting national policy, but we all know a law is only as good as its implementation on the ground, and that is where the state governments come into play. Let's see how this whole structure cascades down to the state level. So each state is required to set up its own state seed committee, and their role is really twofold. First, they act as a liaison advising the central registration body on varieties that are specific to their state's climate and soil. And second, they are the main administrators within their own borders. They oversee the registration of the actual people and businesses in the market and keep tabs on who's selling what at the district level. This table makes the division of labor really clear. Think of it this way. The central government handles the product, the seed varieties themselves. Meanwhile, the state governments are responsible for the people and the businesses, the producers, the dealers, the nurseries operating within their borders. It's a pretty classic federal structure of regulatory control. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most critical piece of this entire puzzle, making sure the seed that actually reaches the farmer is what it claims to be. This last section is all about the machinery of quality control. Section 21. This is really the heart of quality assurance in the bill. It makes it flat out illegal to sell a registered seed unless it meets a whole list of minimum standards. Germination rate, genetic purity, physical purity, seed health, you name it. This is a huge shift. We're moving away from a system of just a voluntary labeling to a legally mandated quality floor for every single registered seed on the market. Now, to enforce all this, the bill creates a whole infrastructure. State governments will set up official certification agencies. The Central Committee can also accredit other organizations, which could open the door to private players. And underpinning this whole thing is a network of central and state testing labs to do the actual science. It's really a three-tiered system: certification, accreditation, and testing. And finally, what about due process? The bill includes that, too. Section 28 lays out a very clear appeals process. So if you're a seed producer and you feel a decision by the registration subcommittee was unfair, you can appeal to the main central seed committee. If it's a state-level decision, you can appeal to a designated appellate authority. This ensures there's always a path for recourse against regulatory decisions. So there you have it. The Seeds Bill 2025 creates this comprehensive, top-down regulatory architecture, from a single central authority right down to local quality control. The legal framework itself is ambitious, it's detailed, but it does leave us with one final and, I think, crucial question. With such an impressive framework on paper, what's going to be the biggest real-world challenge in actually implementing it across a country as vast and diverse as India? And that, right there, is the next big question for researchers and policymakers to tackle.